Okay, now I'd like to talk about the structure of bones. So this is bone structure. Okay, so if we take your typical long bone, this could be anything. It'd be humerus, femur, anything, and you make a cross section, so you cut it right down the middle. All right, we looked at the internal kind of components of what's going on there. You'll see that this bone obviously has the medullary cavity, then it has a series of tiny little circles that surround that medullary cavity and larger circles that surround those. All right, so we're going to talk about what that structure is all about and why it gives the bone its strength, it's kind of its importance. So each one of these tiny little circles of bone tissue that surrounds the medullary cavity, that's called an osteon. All right, and this is kind of the structure of an osteon. All right, so what you'll have is you have a tiny little tube at the center of that osteon, and that tiny little tube contains like a vein, it'll contain an artery, and then it'll contain some nerve tissue, like a nerve. Okay? And this little tube is called a lamella. And it is composed of collagen fibers that run kind of in spiral, but all in about the same direction around that tube. That lamella is then engulfed or encased by another lamella, but its fibers run in a slightly different direction. And then that lamella is encased by another lamella, and its fibers run in yet a different direction, so they might run like that. And what this does is all these different fibers, directions of collagen fibers can resist forces in many different directions, and it really helps prevent twisting motions that happen around the bone. So if the bone experiences torsion or twisting, all of these different directions of fibers associated with these ostia are going to help the bone withstand that force and not break due to the twisting, right? So that's the components of a single ostia. And if we draw a bigger cross section of what the bone looks like, so this is just this part right here enlarged, you'll have the central medullary cavity, which will be surrounded by ostia, which are these guys. Each ostia contains its own little blood vessel, nerve, and all those guys are surrounded by larger kind of circumferential lamellae. Look like that. So they're larger rings of bone tissue called lamella. And that's really the structure of bone. And it's important to note that we have osteocytes kind of drawn in here in blue.